Australian history is filled with the tales of shipwrecks along our often rough and treacherous coast. And due to trade and travel being commonplace to capital cities like Melbourne during the 18 and 1900s, and the often rugged coastline that is so common in Victoria, as well as the rough seas of the Bass Strait, this area of Australia had a reputation of being a shipwreck coast. I'm intrigued by the men who travelled the seas, whether Navy men, sailors, or hardy whaling men. Many of these tough folk lived a harsh life and were used to the conditions that a stormy sea would throw at them. I wanted to explore what a shipwrecked sailor might have salvaged with him when stranded on the coast. So I walked 27 kilometres along a remote coastline with only gear that a 1900s sailor would have available to him.
G'day everyone. In this video I just want to show you the kit and equipment that I'm bringing out with me on this trip that I'm doing right now, and the whole theme of this trip is to be a 1900s sailor that's been shipwrecked along the coastline, has to make his way to the nearest point of civilization. And so I really wanted to go bare bones here and just take stuff that you could have found in the 1900s, around maybe that 1940s era. So to start off with, this is my kit bag. Now, this is a canvas duffel bag or kit bag, and I got this from Aussie Disposals, and it's basically a replica of the old World War I infantry kit bags that they used to use back then. You can actually buy vintage ones of those for a lot more expensive, but yeah, for something that's a bit more cheaper, you can buy this canvas one from Aussie Disposals. And what I did do is I put a kind of a waterproofing wax on it, just because it's quite wet out here on this trip. So yeah, look, it's pretty hard to carry on the shoulder. I've got a bit of a bung shoulder at the moment from it, but look, I reckon you could even sew some straps on it to make more of a backpack style. So yeah, this is what I'm using to carry all my kit in. Now for my food, I've got a cotton tucker bag, and in here I've got, again, all kind of rations that you would have found in the 1940s. So Spam, also tin sardines. Now I looked into it, and canned fish, I do believe, hit Australia around the late 1800s. So, you know, the rations that you would have had as a soldier or a whaler out at sea on a boat, this is the kind of stuff that you could be eating. We've also got crackers, tinned cheese, and yeah, tinned tuna, stuff like that. So yeah, I keep it all in this little cotton bag here for my food. Now for shelter, I basically brought my oilskin tarp here, and this is great. This can double as a swag. You can wrap yourself up in it, or if you're predicting a little bit of rain like we had last night, you can use it as basically like a little pop-up tent, basically a one-person tent. And yeah, this is what the old fellas would have used all the time back in the day. And you can imagine this also on a boat or something like that, on a little rowboat. You could use this to tie it over and have protection from the rain. Use it to collect water if in a survival situation out at sea. These things are really great at repelling water. So yeah, this is what I'm carrying with me for my shelter. All right, for sleeping, basically all I've got is a woolen blanket here. Woolen blankets is what the old fellas used to use all the time. And let me tell you, you don't get the warmest sleep. It definitely takes the edge off when it gets a little bit cold, but it does the job. I slept in it last night and I was a little bit cold, but it definitely, yeah, it helps you survive, let me say that. So if you had a few more of them, it would be all right, but the disadvantage of woolen blankets is they're quite heavy to carry along with you. Okay, for my water kit, this is a 1940s, I think a World War II Romanian infantry canteen with its own nesting cup. This is a legit one from World War II. And I got this from Army and Outdoors, which is a great shop if you want to get those old school army supplies. It's got a cool little belt on it, and yeah, I just love the nesting cup on it. So this is what I'm using for to collect water and drink water. Now for equipment, I have a bit of twine here, which I can use for tying the tarp and things like that, making a little shelter. I've also got my trusty wooden pipe. I have to take my pipe with me if I'm going to be a sailor. You know, the old sailors, they smoke these things all the time. Got a little tin of tobacco here as well. This is a Redhead old school tobacco tin from the 1940s, I do believe. But this tobacco brand, it says he was actually started in 1872. So there you go. I've also carrying with me to start fires a box of Redhead matches. Now you might be thinking, oh, that's pretty modern, carrying some Redhead matches, but I looked into it. This brand of Redhead matches was established in Australia in 1909. So for sure, a 1900 sailor would be able to carry a pack of matches with him back in the day. Now for my tool, I didn't bring any forks, I didn't bring any spoons, and I only brought one knife, which is this military issued knife, jackknife they call it, from 1945, I do believe it has it written on here, no, sorry, 1946. This was military issued. There's a lot of these going around. Last time I spoke about this, I found a lot of people in the comments saying that they had some as well. And yeah, it's got a knife on it, a little saw, and then this is called a marlin spike here, and this is basically used for untying knots on the Navy ships. So yeah, it makes sense that a sailor would have something like this with him. I find this is great for putting a few extra notches in your belt buckle as well, so it works really good, and I do quite like this knife, and for this trip it's doubling as a knife, as a fork, and as a spoon for me. Now for clothing, coming out here for clothing, I decided to wear my gumboots. Now I looked into it, and the three type of footwear that a sailor would have used back in the day is leather boots. Leather boots got quite slippery back in the day, apparently on a deck that, you know, was wet with algae and stuff like that. A lot of sailors went barefoot apparently, but then they also came out with rubber boots, and the Wellington boot, I do believe, I'll put it up on the screen, but it was sometime in the late 1800s, I do believe, that Wellington boots were first brought into Australia. So sailors definitely were able to have access to boots. They were a bit more expensive though, the rubber boots. For clothing, all I'm wearing is, I've got here some cotton thermals for sleeping in at night, and I also have a woolen jumper here, which I'm using to keep me warm, and I'm walking in this. It's interesting to hike in this, but the good thing about wool is if it gets wet, it still maintains that warmth. Now, as you can see here, these are oilskin chaps. So they would have had oilskin clothing back in the day, and this is fantastic for getting wet in. If it's raining on me, I'm staying completely dry. Not only that, if you're out on the high seas and there was sea spray everywhere, this is going to keep your bottom half dry. So it's really good, and just a couple of suspenders to keep it on. Now lastly, I also have, which right now is doubling as my sleeping mat, so I have insulation from the ground, but she's a bit sandy. But I have a nice oilskin jacket as well. For when those storms hit, I can chuck this on and I'm good to go. The elements aren't going to get into me when I'm wearing all this, so this is fantastic stuff. All this oilskin stuff, guys, is from Burke & Wills. I'll put a link in the description where you can get your own oilskin jackets and pants and stuff like that. And then, of course, lastly, to round it all off, I've got the captain's hat. You need a captain's hat if you're going to be a shipwreck sailor. So guys, I hope you enjoyed that little run through of what I'm using for this trip and just some of the history behind it. I hope you enjoyed this video. Do subscribe if you enjoy this old historical, Australian historical swagman, bushranger, but also, you know, sailors out in the high sea, everything around the 1800s, 1900s Australia. Thanks for watching, everyone. Have a good one.